Hey guys, welcome to the 2 Million Minutes podcast, how to make the most of your 4 years in college. I'm Rosan, and during finals week, my friend Lucas and I picked the brains of Harvard seniors and asked them to reflect on their college experiences, break down how they approach different aspects of college life, and share lessons they learned with future students. In this episode, we are talking with Jonathan Roberts, one of this year's Class Day speakers. As a concentrator in organizational behavior, Jonathan designed his own program of concentration and provides some useful tips on what to consider when pursuing a so-called special concentration. We also talk about his summer experience in Chile and his involvement in the student labor activism movement on campus. Jonathan also shares some valuable lessons he learned during his time at Harvard and how he views himself as a Harvard student. We hope you enjoy the conversation, and without any further ado, here is Jonathan Roberts. Let's go. So, today we have Jonathan here with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He's a Class Day speaker for this year's graduating class. And yeah, he's going to talk to us a little bit about his experience here at Harvard and what he does. And my first question to you would be, I heard you were doing a special concentration. What motivated you to do that? Because that's not a path that a lot of students here take.
Yeah, so I think right now we have about 10 or so, maybe it's a bit less, special concentrators across all 4 classes. So when I came in as a freshman, I told myself that I would look at economics or sociology, and I found myself constantly wanting to connect disciplines together.
Mhm.
And I had the great opportunity over the summer between my freshman year and my sophomore year to do research. And there was a rising senior there who had done a special concentration in organizational behavior, which is what I study right now. So we kind of talked about what it looks like, what the process is, and I told myself in the fall of sophomore year that I would apply, and I got in, which has been incredible. So within organizational behavior, I look specifically at social movements and political organizing. And this past summer, I had the chance to go to Santiago, Chile, to study the student protests there around education reform. So it has been an incredible experience. A lot of it has to be self-driven,
Right.
but I think even when there's not departmental or institutional support, I think the staff within special concentrations, they have a chance to really get to know who you are and what your academic interests can look like. And it's just been a
That's awesome.
really cool experience.
What are some of the differences, good or bad, that you think having a special concentration or something that maybe, is not in the norm of what somebody might have the option to do? What are some of the differences that have resulted from that, and how you've had to handle it?
So I think the largest difference is that you don't have a department telling you what to do.
Right.
So you create your own requirements, you create your course of study. So in that sense, there's a lot more flexibility. So I think I definitely changed the way in which I understood organizational behavior since sophomore year, and I think I had the chance to kind of evolve and develop in that way. I will say that a lot of it takes planning, individual planning, planning with faculty members who might not even be from the same departments. So I have my faculty advisor in sociology, my thesis advisor is at HBS. So there's just a lot of coordination that has to happen, and it's not very streamlined in a department. So a department can deal with a lot of people very efficiently, some more than others.
Yeah.
But I think within special concentrations, you just have to really know where you're at, which I think has been very helpful for me. I don't think everyone needs to do a special concentration, but I think if you find yourself saying, either enjoy two disciplines and I want to see how they fit together, or I have this topic that doesn't necessarily fit into anything that is at Harvard. So there are people right now who are studying things like rhetoric or atmospheric studies. So just an incredible person, Matt Capucci, who is a sophomore or a junior. He, no doubt in my mind, is going to become a professional weatherman. And I mean, on Facebook, like he updates us on the weather all the time.
Oh.
So he
That's
walked in and
helpful.
he said, I want to study atmospheric sciences. And he had a chance to. And it's been incredible to see
Wow.
kind of what
That's
he's done. So.
that's
How
really cool.
That is, how did you go about looking into what the requirements you were going to give yourself had to be, and how did you decide, okay, this is what I have to study?
Part of it was looking at comparable courses of study at other institutions. So if I were to study organizational behavior somewhere else, what might it look like? I think for some, really for anything you want to study, there's probably a program out there somewhere, right? So part of it was just referencing those materials. Most of it came to looking at course lists and figuring out, okay, what courses kind of fit my interests. So a lot of planning initially. It took a
Yeah.
lot of Excel documents and kind of Word documents to kind of figure out where I would fit everything together. But I think at that point you have a very strong grasp of how things fit together and how they connect, which has been really nice.
You briefly touched on your summer experience in Chile. How was that like?
It was amazing. So that was the first time that I had done international traveling since coming to Harvard. So there's a lot of problems leading up to it. So kind of travel logistics.
Hmm.
But I think the moment I got there and stepped out of the airport, it was just amazing. And hearing about the type of political activism that students in Chile are doing, it has been very humbling in the respect that I kind of have the opportunity to come back and kind of study it and be more introspective and referential in that sense, but also understanding that they are doing incredible work. So they are pulling thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people on the streets in the summer, and they are fighting for education reform. They're fighting against debt and the privatization of a lot of higher education and primary and secondary education in Chile. So I think it gave me a better understanding of how even as a student we have so much power and we have so much leverage. And I think sometimes at Harvard we take ourselves a little too seriously. And I think that's one lesson that I definitely learned, is that sometimes I need to laugh at myself because I'm worried about getting to this meeting and going to this
Mhm.
club. And those things are important, and I think we should engage with people and kind of associate in those ways, but remembering what the purpose of education is. I think that's really what I got from the experience.
What would you say the purpose of education is?
I think the
Yeah.
purpose is to understand your place in the world, right? So how do you relate to your community? How do you relate to an institution that you're part of? How do you relate to your job, right? I think it's strange because I call this a very liberal arts institution, but very rarely are you asked at Harvard. I think in part because we're always juggling 20 different things, right? We're very rarely asked, who are you and who you want to become. I think oftentimes that is reduced to what internships do you have over the summer or what clubs are you in. And I think really this is the unique opportunity that we have in our life where we can kind of separate ourselves from all of the real world
Yeah.
phenomena that happen and really be critical and reflective about ourselves. And I think if we take the time to do that, at least it's been helpful for me to figure out the things that I should care about, like family and service work, and how I fit into certain like institutions, but also the things that I probably shouldn't take so seriously, right? So I mean, I don't need to, stress over problem sets so much, or like exams, which are important, and please get those grades, get those grades. But sometimes it's just nice to remember why we're here, right? And
Yeah.
that will be fine. I think everyone is probably going to leave with a degree, and if not a degree, then you'll found Facebook or something, right? So it's one of those places where it's just nice to have that different perspective and decenter myself.
Definitely. Um, so you were also very involved in the student labor um, action movement. How was that experience like as a college student doing a lot of stuff also outside of academics?
It was an incredible experience, and I will say that I definitely can't take credit for anything that happened last semester. I mean, workers really put in, so much effort and kind of so much passion into kind of sharing their experiences and fighting for affordable healthcare, which I think is now a national topic. So I think in many ways it speaks to where we're at as a nation. But it has been amazing, especially coming off of the experience of being in Santiago, Chile, and then coming back
Yeah.
here and seeing more political developments. It was, in many ways, kind of like a priming experience in Chile to remember that I'm here to do more than just study. I'm also here to figure out how I interface with the people in this community, right? So that includes workers, that includes faculty members, that includes other students, it includes members of Cambridge and Boston, right? And I think you saw all of those groups kind of coalesce together for a common cause. Um, I think, the work that Dynacon workers put in, especially to making this place feel like home, is amazing. And I think irrespective of the work that they do, they are part of this community, right? And it was so amazing to see so many parts of this community that often don't talk to each other that much. For one issue, they came together and did incredible work. And the almost 800 workers who decided to go on strike and kind of disrupt this big institution.
Oh
We can't even get. We can't even probably like schedule a party without going through like 5 committees, right?
yeah.
And yet, workers had the imagination and the conviction to think about, what they deserve. So it was incredible.
Mm. What were some of the things that initially got you interested in student activism? And how do you think other students might also look for those things that they would get interested in?
Let's see, where did I start? I think there weren't many activist opportunities where I'm from, but I've always been someone who wants to be politically conscious. So coming here, I told myself that, I would do public service, I would join some political groups, though most of those just didn't pan out because I am terrible at comping anything. But I think it really started kind of sophomore year when I became a FUP leader. And I think that was the first time that I really had conversations with other students about
The fall urban program?
Yeah, first year urban program, yeah.
All right.
So within that program, incoming freshmen are exposed to kind of public service, activism. We also have a lot of discussions about identity. So I think all of those things were activated in one space, and we had very difficult conversations that lasted hours and hours and hours, and we would come out just so drained. But I think it was also very very restorative in the sense that I kind of had all these things line up finally, and I think that was when I told myself that I probably need to do more on this campus, beyond just doing the things that are kind of the check mark boxes for a resume, right? So I think certainly last fall was the moment that I will remember coming out of college, right? Just seeing workers win that battle. And I think a lot of the other, action that is political here happens within public service, right? So I think that is a very political activity that I definitely think students should be involved in. So I supervise right now at Y2Y, which is the new youth homeless shelter, and I think just committing yourself to always to being a public servant, right? I think we're going to leave here as leaders, and I've always learned that being a leader means being a public servant, right? It means being accountable to someone, and it doesn't mean being at the forefront of everything, right? So I think people here are going to leave as business leaders and doctors and lawyers and presidents and all these amazing things, but within all of those very successful professions, I think we should never lose sight of, and I really hope that I never lose sight of the call to action, right, and the responsibility that we have to other people.
So speaking about identity, how do you view your identity as a Harvard student? How do you?
I think it's very contradictory and hypocritical, complex, layered. I have so many adjectives to use. So every time I go back home, and I think this is true for a lot of people. So I get super stressed out about finals. I go home and I just get a huge wake up call or a slap that's like, why are you so strange now, Jonathan? Right? So my friends and family, relatives, there's this real disconnect between being on Harvard campus and thinking about the things that we go through every day, and we kind of understand the language and the like habitus of Harvard, right? But when we go home, I think it's a very unique experience. So on campus, right, like being involved in public service and activism is contradictory because you understand that this institution has a lot of resources and power. You also recognize sometimes how institutions fail to live up to certain expectations that people have. I think as a student, you learn how we often kind of privilege certain discussions over other discussions, right? So talking about, I don't know, social spaces and not necessarily engaging in issues of, class or, race or sexuality on this campus, right? Which I think are part of what make this place inclusive to a lot of people. So I think sometimes it's just very good to go home and remove myself from Harvard to recognize that I'm leaving here as a person who is transformed by this institution in many ways. I think I've gotten so much from this institution, but also some things that are very unique to this institution, right? So I think not necessarily just Harvard. I think it's part of a lot of systems of higher education. Ooh, let me turn this off.
Oh, don't worry about it.
But there's certainly, I think we should all remember that things can conflict, right? I think being a Harvard student means that you care about, making a difference, and it means that you care about your academics. It means that you care about, you know, being in a lot of organizations. It also means that sometimes we don't look at friends with the level of value that we maybe should. It means that we sometimes have disconnects with our family and our community. And those aren't to say that Harvard is a bad place, but it is to say that we kind of have to reckon with all of the things that happen.
If you could think back to freshman year for a second, one interesting question that we have asked before is, what is something you learned freshman year that turned out to be wrong?
Ooh.
How would you answer
Ooh,
that?
how many things? Oh my goodness. Let's see. So I told myself freshman year, oh, I definitely don't care about, joining all these clubs. And then sophomore year, I comped like 10 extra things, right?
Oh, wow.
So I think I told myself coming out of freshman year that I definitely want to be someone who doesn't have to meet all these social expectations. But that never goes away. I think the imposter syndrome is always there, where we're like, do we belong here? Do we kind of meet the Harvard paradigm that everyone looks? So irrespective of who you are, where you come from, I think when we get here, we all have this bar that we want to reach. And I told myself freshman year, I'm gonna go over that bar, then I'm gonna say, I don't need to be boxed in. No, I mean I'm a senior and I'm still worried about this mess. But so that's the big thing for me is freshman year. I think it's very easy to think that you understand your purpose on campus, right? So I have a lot of friends who are underclassmen who are doing a lot of amazing work from back home and have told themselves that they are definitely going to do this, right?
Yeah.
And then the next year, all of that gets turned around, right? So I think freshman year is about establishing the fact that you just go to Harvard because it takes a long time to kind of condition yourself to this place. And then once you do that, sophomore year, junior year is where you really flesh out the kinks in that logic, right? So I came in taking economics and sociology, and I thought, oh, I'm going to study, market inequalities, which is great. I'm not telling people not to study those. Um, but I found myself being more and more interested in social movements and in the ways that people organize. And I think a lot of people here freshman year will say, I want to do X concentration and then change to another one or be trapped because they don't figure it out in time. But I think a lot of it is just accepting change. I think that is one thing that I did right freshman year, say I'm going to change as a person here. I definitely have.
Right. So. Along similar lines, what is one piece of advice you'd give to younger classes, whether it's juniors who are going to be seniors or incoming students who are going to be freshmen?
Let's see. Obviously, do public service. I think it's just an expectation that I think we all should have, and for some reason don't necessarily meet. Because I think we're worried about a lot of other things, to be sure, but definitely do public service. I think that is something that we all owe to this community. And then, in addition to that, be open to being wrong and be open to having to listen to people about their pain and their struggles, because I think it's very easy for us to get trapped inside our own heads and think that the world is crumbling. And there are very hard things that people go through here. And I don't want to minimize those in any way because I think we should be able to talk about our own pain and our own kind of worries here on campus. But certainly, we aren't the only people who inhabit this space. And it has been very helpful for me to have that, right? To have that understanding that I am here with other people who, on some level, I can connect with. I might not fully understand where they're coming from, but I can connect with these people, right? Because we all share this identity as being a Harvard student. And we all kind of have a very rough outline of what burdens that brings with it. And I think sometimes when we treat it as a collective problem and not an individual problem, then it's very easy to to laugh at it and to kind of find strength in it in a way that I think if you take on all of these things by yourself, you're just not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
All right.
So maybe talking about that a little bit, what keeps you sane?
Ooh.
What keeps you sane here at Harvard? Any specific rituals or hobbies or?
Waking up at 11 a.m. is clutch. I don't know how people do 9 a.m. classes. So that's the one thing I also learned freshman year. I just can't I can't fall into a high school schedule. So I mean, waking up at 5 a.m. in high school was just so typical to finish homework, and I missed too many 9 a.m. classes when I came here. And this year, my earliest class is 11:30. Still, I'm late. I'm still late. But I think sleep is one function of a more general suggestion that I have, which is just take time for yourself. I think that is something that has kept me going here, is being able to engage in like these collective conversations and get understanding from that, but then come back to my room and just say, oh my gosh, I just need to I don't know, watch Netflix or do something. And we all already do that, but don't treat that time as wasted time necessarily, because I think burnout happens here, and I think sometimes it's hard to acknowledge that we're burned out because we have 15 other things lined up, but certainly we all are being pushed to certain limits, and it's nice to just have a space to say, this is me, let me just rest. Some people, people from the quad are so strange. I will never understand them. But I think to their credit, they always talk about, oh, well, walking back to the quad, it's so great. Oh, being on the shuttle gives me time to unwind. I don't think that's true. But I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it is. And maybe we all have our own different ways of just coping, but certainly they're all very personal and intimate. Always repping with their house also. So
So finding what can help people cool down, whatever that may be for them.
yeah, and I think oftentimes it's not going to a party, right? I think parties are very stressful. I love to party, but they're very stressful. I don't think you find restoration in a party. I think you find restoration when you're in your own sphere, and you can kind of just figure out who you are, and maybe not figure out who you are at all, and just be lazy, right? I think we have that, right?
Yeah.
So at least, if not a right, then the opportunity to be lazy. So let's take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, I think that was great.
Wow.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
This is super great. And yeah.
Can you spoil anything from your class day speech?
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, most of what I have been saying is in some way linked to my speech. So I think if you watch this and then you watch my class day speech will just be a more formalized version of everything that I just told you.
That's awesome. Wow. So that's something people can look out for.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing that.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.